What if the things you do every day, the way you sleep, the way you treat illness, even where you walk, what if those things would terrify someone from the future? That's exactly how we feel looking back at medieval times. They had cures that made you sicker, justice that put pigs on trial, and a relationship with death so casual, it's chilling. Before I show you the creepiest examples, do this. Click like if you enjoy history that makes your skin crawl. Subscribe to Little Historical so you don't miss the next strange story. Now, take a breath, and let's walk into the past together. You wouldn't believe what a medieval cemetery really was. Today, when we think of a graveyard, we imagine a quiet, fenced-off place where we whisper and walk softly, where death is kept at a polite distance behind stone walls and iron gates. But in the Middle Ages, there was no distance at all. The cemetery wasn't on the edge of town, hidden away like a secret too sad to look at. It was right in the middle of everything. It was the shortcut you took to get to the market. It was the meeting spot where lovers arranged secret glances. It was even the playground where children ran barefoot, laughing and chasing each other between crooked headstones. And here's where it gets strange. The dead didn't stay buried. Not really. The soil was shallow, the coffins were cheap, and the rain was relentless. After a good storm, bones would simply rise to the surface like they had something left to say. A skull might roll into the path. A femur would stick out of the mud like a forgotten tree root. And nobody screamed. Nobody ran. A peasant walking to work would nudge the skull aside with his foot, maybe toss it toward the church wall, and keep walking. No horror. No prayers. Just a mild inconvenience. Imagine that kind of closeness to death, not once a year at a funeral, but every single morning when you open your door. Imagine teaching your child not to kick the bone because it belonged to someone once. Imagine lying in your own bed at night, knowing that just outside, generations of skeletons were slowly surfacing, rearranging themselves, waiting for the next heavy rain. There's a strange intimacy to it, isn't there? A quiet, almost unsettling bond between the living and the dead. The graveyard wasn't a place of mourning. It was a place of business, of gossip, of first kisses and last arguments. Death wasn't an ending. It was just another neighbor. And that neighbor never moved away. But the graves themselves weren't the end of the story. Because when the cemetery ran out of room, medieval people did something even more disturbing with all those bones. They built walls out of them. They decorated chapels with them. And that is exactly where we're heading next. But before we step inside those bone-lined chapels, we have to talk about something even closer to home. Something that touched every single person in the Middle Ages, from the poorest peasant to the richest lord. Their own blood. You see, medieval people didn't just live alongside the dead. They also had a relationship with their own bodies that would make any modern doctor shudder. And it started with a simple, terrifying belief that sickness was caused by too much blood. Too much of the very thing that keeps you alive. Their solution: get rid of some. Not a little. A lot. This was called bloodletting, and it was the cure for everything. Fever. Bleed them. Headache. Bleed them. Feeling sad, tired, or just a bit off. Open a vein and watch the answer drip into a bowl. And here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. The person doing this wasn't always a doctor. Most of the time, it was your barber. The same man who trimmed your beard, shaved your head, and maybe pulled your tooth. That same pair of hands would hold a small knife to your arm, make a quick cut, and let your life force pour out into a waiting dish. No numbing. No sterilization. Just confidence and a prayer. You would sit there, watching your own blood pool and darken, while the barber nodded as if he were solving a puzzle. If you started to feel dizzy, that meant it was working. If you fainted, well, that meant it was really working. Some people were bled once a month, like a subscription service for health. And nobody questioned it. That's the quiet horror, isn't it? Not the knife, not the pain, but the trust. The absolute, unquestioning faith that losing blood would save you. Imagine booking an appointment to have your veins opened, paying for the privilege, and walking home feeling grateful. Imagine holding your child down while a man with dirty fingernails slices into their arm, because you truly believe that this bleeding will stop their cough. There's a strange intimacy to that kind of trust, A desperate closeness between healer and patient that feels almost forbidden by modern standards. And yet, for centuries, this was medicine. This was hope. But bloodletting wasn't the only way medieval doctors got personal with your body. They also had a fascination with what came out of you in other ways. And that is where the story gets even stranger. And that fascination took them somewhere most of us would never dare to go. After the barber finished draining your blood, after you stumbled home dizzy and pale, the next step in medieval medicine often involved a small flask and a very private examination. You see, doctors back then didn't have microscopes or lab tests. They had their senses. And they believed that your body revealed its secrets through what it expelled. Specifically, through your urine. A patient would arrive at the physician's door carrying a small glass flask, usually still warm from their body, and hand it over with complete seriousness. The doctor would hold it up to the light, swirl it gently, and study its color with deep concentration. Pale meant one thing. Dark meant another. Cloudy meant something else entirely. That alone feels invasive enough by modern standards, watching a stranger stare at something so personal. But medieval medicine didn't stop at looking. Next came the smell. A slow, deliberate sniff, sometimes followed by a thoughtful nod or a slight frown. The odor, they believed, carried messages from deep inside your organs. A strong smell suggested imbalance. A weak smell hinted at weakness. And at no point did anyone in that room wonder if perhaps they shouldn't be inhaling so closely. But here is where it crosses into something almost unspeakable. In some cases, the doctor would take a small taste. A dab on the tip of the tongue. A quick, professional sip. Sweetness could mean diabetes. Bitterness pointed to liver trouble. Saltiness meant something else entirely. The medieval physician stood there, tongue slightly wet, considering your internal health like a wine critic judging a questionable vintage. And patients trusted this. They sat quietly, watching a man taste their own waste, and felt relieved that someone was taking their suffering seriously. There is a strange, uncomfortable intimacy in that scene, isn't there? A bond formed through the most private of exchanges. You would let this person taste what left your body, and then you would thank him and pay him and return next month for another checkup. No shame. No disgust. Just quiet acceptance. The same hands that held your urine flask would later break bread, touch your face, or deliver a baby. And nobody washed. Nobody thought to wash. Because germs were still centuries away from being invented. What makes this truly haunting isn't the act itself. It's how normal it felt to them. How completely they trusted that their own fluids held answers. How willing they were to be seen, smelled, and tasted in ways we would never allow today. But medieval medicine had one more level of horror, one final step beyond blood and urine. And that step involved cutting into your flesh while you were fully awake. That is where we go next. And that step involved cutting into your flesh while you were fully awake. That is where we go next. But before we reach for the knife, there is another kind of wound the Middle Ages inflicted, one that didn't leave a scar on the body but carved itself deep into the soul of their justice system. You see, medieval people didn't just believe that your blood or your urine could betray you. They believed that even animals could be guilty. Not metaphorically. Not in a fairy tale sense. Legally, officially, and with a straight face, they put pigs, rats, and even insects on trial. Imagine standing in a crowded square, watching a farmer drag a pig forward while a judge in a black robe reads charges aloud. The pig attacked a child. The pig knew what it was doing. And now the pig would face the consequences. That animal would be dressed in human clothes, sometimes even a tiny jacket or a hood, and led to a public execution. The crowd would watch, not in horror, but with the same calm attention they gave to a hanging or a market day. This was justice. This was order. And nobody laughed. What makes this so unsettling isn't the absurdity. It's the intimacy of the accusation. The belief that an animal could understand right from wrong, could choose to do evil, and therefore deserved punishment just like a person. Lawyers were appointed to defend these creatures. Court records show serious arguments about whether rats had been properly summoned, whether the roads were too dangerous for them to appear, whether cats posed a legitimate threat to their safety. These were not jokes. These were legal strategies. And sometimes the animals won. Sometimes the case was dismissed because the defendant, a swarm of locusts or a flock of birds, couldn't be located. Other times, the animal was excommunicated. Yes, excommunicated. A priest would stand in a field and formally curse the insects, ordering them to leave the village or face spiritual consequences. The insects, unsurprisingly, rarely complied. But the ritual itself mattered. It restored balance. It reminded everyone watching that the universe had rules and that those rules applied to every living thing, no matter how small or furry. There is a strange, almost forbidden tenderness in that belief, isn't there? The idea that a pig could be guilty implies that a pig could also be innocent. That animals had souls, or something close enough to deserve judgment. We don't think that way anymore. We call animal control. We set traps. We don't hold trials. But the Middle Ages looked at a rampaging pig and saw a criminal. They looked at a rat eating grain and saw a defendant. And they looked at you, at your bleeding arm, at your flask of urine, and saw a body full of secrets waiting to be drained, tasted, or cut open. The creepiest thing about medieval times isn't any single practice. It's how calmly they accepted all of it. The bones in the street. The blood in the bowl. The taste on the tongue. The pig in the courtroom. This was their normal. And that quiet, intimate acceptance, that is what still haunts us today.